Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Evelyn the Unstable, and today I'd like to talk to you about Oreos. So what's an Oreo? An Oreo is a black person or a person of color who acts white, dresses white, or talks white. So what's the problem with this? The problem with this is people who generally call someone an Oreo tend to be white people are saying that a person of color or a black person can't speak properly, or if they do dress white, they're taking away, or they're not dressed like what their cultural background dresses like. So what you dress like doesn't matter. You know, I dressed as I do. I wear a lot of black. So who am I supposed to be dressing like? I don't see the problem. And as far as how I speak, so I speak properly. You can understand what I'm saying. I enunciate. And I've oftentimes had people who have called me an Oreo because of how I speak. So I don't understand what's the problem. And that tends to be the thing that a lot of white people come at me for, because they're saying, hey, you just don't sound like a black person. Well, what is a black person supposed to sound like? What are they supposed to sound like? Because I sure don't know. From what I know and from what I've seen and heard, people sound like the people that they're around all the time. So if you're in South Side, maybe you're gonna sound different to someone who lives in North Side. That's just like people around the country who have accents. That was my phone. Ignore the noises. So what about how I dress? I really don't know anyone else who dresses like me, but just because I'm not someone who, I don't know, dresses in a button-up. Well, this is a button-up. Pay no mind. Well, just because I don't dress like someone who's white, even though in hindsight, what is a black person supposed to dress like? I guess the average person sees like the famous black person who these days I've seen them in quite a bit of suits, but I guess in the mid 2000s they wore really oversized shirts and they sagged heavily. Is that supposed to be what a black person dresses like? Because I'm wearing a button up, so what does that matter? And as far as acting white, I didn't know white people acted a certain way. I mean, these days, we have quite a bit of Karens, but I'm not judging. So what has me acting the way I do and a white person acting the way they do matter? As far as speaking, it's just speaking properly. So at the end of the day, why does it matter that someone or a black person calling another black person Oreo, or a white person calling another black person Oreo? Why does that matter? So it matters because it affects the way you see yourself. So let's say, like, for example, for me, I grew up in a mostly white school, and when other white kids would call me an Oreo, them not exactly experiencing what other black kids act like, because we didn't have that many black kids in our school. Just in my grade, we had 3 black students. It was me and then 2 other guys. So as far as that goes, they only saw how they acted and how I acted. And the only black people they would really see would be when maybe if they went to the mall or if they saw some on TV. So they didn't exactly have much experience to be calling someone an Oreo or not, but they called me an Oreo and they saw it as a compliment. They'd always just be like, oh, you're such an Oreo, you know, like you're total Oreo. You just, the way you speak, that's what they sounded like to me. I totally remember because I didn't even know how to feel. But it honestly affected how I saw myself because I would just be like, oh yeah, I mean, I'm an Oreo, you know, like, but the problem with that is that that's kind of just like, you know, you're black on the outside and white on the inside, but I'm not. You know, we're all the same on the inside, but at the end of the day, I am a person of color. I am black. And I was letting these kids in elementary school, middle school, and first part of high school come in and say, you know, oh, you're such an Oreo because of how I dressed and how I acted and how I spoke. Like for me, for a good while, like as a little kid, I thought that this thing, or this word, was a compliment. Now looking back on it, I can't imagine how I thought that. You know, they were trying to say that, I mean, I didn't really see it as a kid, but they were trying to say that as a black person, speaking properly is not what you're doing if you're speaking the way you normally should. You know, that's the problem. The problem is you're supposedly not speaking properly, and the way to speak is the white person's way to speak. The way to act is the white person's way to act. And the way to dress is the white person's way to dress, and then they're basically glorifying how they act, dress, and speak, and saying that, you know, you're an Oreo because you're acting like us. And that's the problem. No anyone in general should be compared to a white person and said hey, and told, hey, you're such an Oreo. Because just because someone speaks properly or because someone dresses like you does not mean that they're less black, or they're less Indian or Asian or anything. There was tons of Asian kids who dressed like the other white kids did, but the other two black guys in my grade, they did the same thing. But we did those things because that's what we saw. That's what we thought was cool. Because there were so many white kids who did this, and for them and to us, it was just normal. But we were called Oreos because we were dressing like them, we were acting like them. But that's the thing though, if this is what we're seeing, how else did they want us to dress? And why did it matter what we dressed like in general? So what really bothered me is that getting older, it doesn't affect them anymore. It just affects us, people who have been called Oreos, who are still seeing others being called Oreos. I actually met a lady in the mall, and we somehow ended up getting on this topic. She actually also went to a school where it was mostly white kids, and she was called an Oreo too because of how she spoke. And she, better than me, understood that that was wrong, and that she wasn't losing her blackness just because some kid was calling her an Oreo, and it did bother her. And she did understand that they were saying that to be proper is to speak white. So now, as a 21-year-old person, I am trying to tell you Just don't call anyone an Oreo, whether you are black, whether you are white. It is wrong to call someone an Oreo because it doesn't make them less black. It doesn't make them less Indian. It doesn't make them less of anything else just because they're acting the way you deem proper. So that's my spiel for today. This is Evelyn the Unstable. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.